Recently, a man was in news. On the occasion of the Queen of England's 70 years in office as the Queen, it had been announced that in an exclusive club of some 65 well-known people, a prominent author was being added. None other than Salman Rushdie. But little did he know that a few days after the announcement of such an honor, he will be attacked by someone who, is carrying a vendetta against Salman Rushdie. That is all we are going to talk about in this video. My name is Manish Mittal and you're watching Hit Bullseye. We are going to talk about this attack on Salman Rushdie. It's not a very simple topic. We are going to discuss about Mr. Salman Rushdie, about the books he has written and how he has come to influence the entire literature world through his fine writings. And we also try to understand what is the controversy all about and what is the genesis of that controversy, which is now materializing itself into this particular event through this particular attack. So let's try to understand what this is all about. So first of all, some things about Mr. Salman Rushdie. So he was born in 1947, just 2 months shy of independence, and his full name is Sir Ahmed Salman Rushdie. So his full name is Sir Ahmed Salman Rushdie, and he's a Muslim by religion. Generally, we do not need to know about the religion of someone, but this is important to mention here because of the controversy that is surrounded with him. So he is an Indian-born British-American novelist. So right now his citizenship is British-American, but he was born in India. His work combines realism with historical fiction and primarily deals with migrations between Eastern and Western civilizations. Some of his finest works include this kind of thinking or this line of thought, which we will talk about. So this is a few facts about Salman Rushdie, where he was born. Some prominent books of Rushdie include Grimus, which was his first ever work. His first novel was Grimus, and it was released way back in the late 1970s. But this is, it was neither critically acclaimed nor it was the finest work of Rushdie, but it was his first work, and that's why it is important for us to know. Grimus was the first novel written by Salman Rushdie. The second novel, Midnight's Children, is the one that brought him to international fame. So Midnight's Children was written in 1981, and this book gave Salman Rushdie the Booker's Prize, which is the biggest prize in the English world, the Booker's Prize. So much so that he was even awarded the best of the Booker's Prize. That means on the 25th and 40th anniversary occasions of the Booker Prize, it was announced that this Booker Prize is the best of all the Booker Prizes, which is, I think, one of the most extinct, or one I should say most distinguished honors given to this book by Salman Rushdie. So this was the book that brought him international fame. However, a book written in the late 1980s called Satanic Verses is the book that brought him fame along with a lot of controversy. So it is alleged that in this book he had said something blasphemous, or something that the Muslims thought were against the Prophet, or that the Muslims thought was derogatory to Islam. So that is why the controversy started, which we'll talk about in a few moments. And Joseph Anton is the book that he wrote in 2012, because this was his pseudonym or his pen name that he used to hide when people were looking out to kill him, looking for him to kill him. So let's talk about these books a bit more in detail. First of all, the book that brought Salman Rushdie all the fame that he's known for, Midnight's Children. And this book is so prominent that it is widely believed in the literary world that unless you have read this book, you know little about English literature. That is the stature this book carries. And from the cover of this book, just see what the New York Review of Books has written. I quote, "An extraordinary novel, one of the most important to come out of the English-speaking world in this generation." Just look at the wording that is used. The most important. So the words that are used are most important, extraordinary, in this generation. The most important English speaking, most important work in the English speaking world in this generation. That is a huge compliment to accord to a particular book. So this book catapulted him to literary notability, and it won him 1981 Booker Prize, and in 1993 and 2008 was awarded the best of the Bookers. That means he not only won the Booker Prize for a single year, he also won the best of the Booker's Prize. Like in the first 25 years as well as in the first 40 years, all the Booker Prizes that had been won, this book is like the Booker of the Bookers, the best of the best. The best novel to have received the prize during its first 25 and 40 years. So that is a distinction that only a handful of authors have had. So that is the book that brought him all the fame that he is known for. But later on, he got into the controversy with this particular book, Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses. And this is the image of Salman Rushdie from those years. So the Satanic Verses in 1988 caused immediate controversy in the Islamic world that was seen by some as an irreverent depiction of the Muhammad. Now we will not get into so much of controversy. It's just that he talked about a particular tradition in Islam that was widely believed that does not exist. Like there is a controversy whether that particular tradition exists or not. But he, owing to his literary, let's say, creativity, took that particular topic and discussed it in detail in the book. And he later on said that he did not think that he had done anything blasphemous. And in an interview to the BBC, and I quote, he said that, "I wish I had written a more critical book." That this book did not deserve this much of criticism. "I wish I had written a more critical book." This was his wording. That means he did not regret what he wrote. And he said that in Islam it is written that the Prophet was not the God. He was the messenger of the God. Therefore, the notion of him being perfect is flawed even in Islamic, even in Islamic scholars' viewpoint. So that is something that he has stood for. And a few days after the book came out, exactly on the 14th of February 1989, a fatwa, which we will discuss in a few moments what a fatwa is. A fatwa, or let's say a judgment of an Islamic scholar, ordering Salman Rushdie's execution was proclaimed on Radio Tehran, Tehran being the capital of Iran, by Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, the supreme religious leader of Iran, issued a fatwa or judgment against him that he be executed because he has insulted the Prophet, calling the book blasphemous against Islam. So he issued a fatwa or order, ordering the execution of Salman Rushdie because he had insulted the Prophet. A bounty was offered, which has went up to $3 million now. So anyone who kills Salman Rushdie will presumably get $3 million from Iran. And he was forced to live under police protection for several years. And this was criticized by the Western world vehemently. United States, the United Kingdom, and the entire Western world, who are the votaries of free speech and liberty, they vehemently protested against this fatwa issued by Iran. So much so that in 1989, the United Kingdom and Iran broke their diplomatic relations over this Rushdie controversy. The UK abolished, or let's say they struck off their diplomatic relations with Iran on this particular controversy. And to the surprise of many, I don't know how many of you know this, but till date the fatwa stands. It has not been officially pulled out. And there was a very famous, or let's say infamous, quote said by the Ayatollah Khomeini. He said that the fatwa is like a bullet fired from a gun. Unless it hits the target, it will be in the air. That means that unless he is executed, the fatwa will stand. It will not be withdrawn. And surprisingly, in 2016, the amount of the bounty was increased. That means the controversy did not die down, and it still stands. Then, so began the extraordinary story of a writer who was forced underground, moving from house to house in the constant protection of an armed police force. He was forced to live in exile. He was forced to live under protection for many years. Otherwise, he would have been killed by now. There were several officially acclaimed, or let's say officially acknowledged attempts of assassination on him. He was asked to choose an alias that the police could call him by. So he had to choose a name. उसे उन्हें एक ऐसा नाम चुनना पड़ा जो कि सिर्फ पुलिस यूज़ करेगी. It's like a secret name that he could choose so that he could not be detected. So he came up with this particular name, Joseph Anton. Now where did this name come from? उन्होंने ये नाम रखा जितनी देर वो exile में थे. So he had two of his famous, or let's say favorite authors, who were Joseph Conrad and Anton Chekhov. Joseph Conrad and Anton Chekhov, and he combined the names of both, Joseph Anton. This was his pen name, or this was his secret name through which the armed police or the secret police called him, so that he could not be detected. And based on this, this name, many years later in 2012 he wrote this particular book, Salman Rushdie, Joseph Anton, a memoir, which is basically the story of his life into hiding. जितनी देर भी वो exile में रहे, जितनी देर भी वो hiding में रहे, उतनी देर उनकी life कैसी थी. This is a story of that. Joseph Anton, a memoir. That means it's a sort of his autobiography. Now what is a fatwa? What is a fatwa that was issued against him by the supreme leader of Iran? A fatwa is a legal decree. It's a legal decree or a judgment on a point of Islamic law. So an Islamic law viewpoint or a decree is known as a fatwa, or it can be an opinion given by a high-ranking Islamic religious leader, religious authority, or qualified council of scholars. So it means it's a religious thing. So it's like in Muslim personal law, there is a provision of a fatwa in which a Muslim scholar, generally known as a mufti, right, generally known as a mufti, issues it. Like he's a religious Islamic scholar and he has the power to issue this fatwa. And in this, there are certain norms of behavior or something that needs to be followed or not to be followed. So fatwa is like an order. It can address a range of issues, including those of individuals. So इस तरह के fatwas, हजारों fatwas आज तक issue हुए हैं. Though they are considered authoritative, like they have charismatic authority, people believe or people, obey the fatwas out of the sheer reverence for Islam, not because of any legal force. Fatwas are generally not treated as binding judgments. And if a requester finds a fatwa unconvincing, is permitted to seek another opinion. So fatwas are not legally binding. They are influential because people generally, the Muslims, they believe and they implement the fatwas, they obey the fatwas. Otherwise, in legal sanctity is disputed. They need not be, legally sanctimonious, just that they are revered by the Muslims and they believe and they obey whatever the fatwas say. However, issuing such a fatwa to execute someone is, apparently bad in law. It's illegal on the face of it. So this fatwa was issued. And now, how can we relate to the particular controversy of Satanic Verses and how this fatwa was issued after that and how this particular attack has happened? Some of you might say that the degree of relatability is too high, or let's say the attack or the fatwa was issued in 1989. The attack has taken place in 2022. So is it a reasonable nexus? Is there any reasonable nexus between the two? Let's see. So there's a more than 30 years gap, or let's say 33-year gap between both the incidents. जब fatwa issue हुआ था और जब ये attack हुआ है. So on 12th of August 2022, a man stabbed him multiple times as he was about to give a public lecture in an institution in New York. So this is the recent incident that we are talking about. So the name of the attacker is Hadi Matar, and here is the image of that particular person who was detained, Hadi Matar. And he was arrested on the scene. He was charged with assault and attempted murder. He stabbed him multiple times. Now let's see who this man is so that we can understand whether there's any connection between the fatwa that was issued in 1989 and this particular attack. So this man, Hadi Matar, is living in New Jersey. That means he's a resident of United States of America. That is one thing. He was born to Lebanese parents. he was born to Lebanese parents. So he's a Muslim. That is one part of his identity. He's a Lebanese by descent. That is the second part of his identity. And Lebanon is a Shia Islamic country. So an analysis of his social media accounts showed him to be sympathetic to Shia extremism. His social media accounts show that he is sympathetic to Shia extremism and the causes of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, what is IRGC? It is an ideologically driven branch of Iranian armed forces committed to protecting the country's Islamic system from hostile foreign powers and internal dissension. So IRGC एक ऐसी armed force है जो कि इस्लाम को बचाने में help करती है. It is a uniquely Iranian force. The purpose of this force is it is ideologically driven and it is committed to protecting the country's Islamic system. So his social media account following his activity on the internet and outside shows that he was sympathetic to Shia extremism. So somehow the issuing of the fatwa and the execution or the attempt to execute Mr. Rushdie can be reasonably linked. Right? So this is what can be drawn from what we have now. And as far as Mr. Rushdie is concerned, he is out of danger but still is in the hospital. So he's not died. That's why the charge of attempt to murder and not murder. In this context, India's role also has been quite controversial because in 1989, when the Satanic Verses was banned, India was one of the first countries to ban the Satanic Verses. और बाद में इसका बहुत ज़्यादा criticism भी हुआ है. And 1989, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India and he banned the book straight away. और 2015-16 के आसपास बहुत सारे कांग्रेस के सीनियर मिनिस्टर्स ने इस बात को माना है that banning the book was a wrong on the part of the Prime Minister of that time. So India was one of the first countries to ban it, जबकि बहुत सारी Islamic countries ने भी अभी उस book को ban नहीं किया था, because apparently at that time there was a lot of appeasement politics going on in India, as is also evident by the Shah Bano case, in which the Muslim women's right to get an alimony was let's say overturned by this particular case. So there was a Supreme Court judgment in the Shah Bano case, but it was overturned by the government, thereby restricting the women's right to alimony. So the Satanic Verses, and India is not aloof from such a controversy as well. Anyway, this also brings into question the freedom of speech and expression. The freedom of speech and expression. The freedom of speech and expression is a fundamental right in India as well and in many other countries as well. But does it mean an individual can just say and express anything under the sun? No. Even in the Indian Constitution, on one hand, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A mentions the freedom of speech and expression as a fundamental right. But in the second breath, under Article 19, Clause 2, it gives 8 reasonable restrictions on the same. It can be security of the state, it can be defamation, it can be maintenance of law and order, it can be maintaining good relations with foreign nations, it can be morality. There are 8 grounds which can reasonably restrict the freedom of speech and expression. But when it comes to issues like the Satanic Verses, the line to draw is really, really difficult. Where that line is to be drawn, whether something is just or whether something is unjust. The level of subjectivity in various artworks can be really, really, hairline thin, and it's very difficult to draw that line over what is, justified and what is not justified, what is reasonable and what is non-reasonable. But anyway, even if it is non-reasonable, under the 4 walls of the law, it does not give the right to any authority to issue a fatwa or an order of execution for someone, and attacking is outright breaking the law. So that is all that we needed to know. There are many books that have been banned in India as well, so that has to be seen in this particular context as well. So this is the story of Mr. Salman Rushdie, how he was catapulted into fame by Midnight's Children, then how he chose controversy through the Satanic Verses, how he has lived under the shadow of fear for 30-40 years, but nonetheless never, the fear was never able to silence his dissenting voice. and he has been delivering lectures, he has been writing numerous books, winning a number of awards, and just a few weeks before he got attacked, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, or let's say a very exclusive club, which has only 65 persons, and it is maintained by the Queen of England on the occasion of 70 years of her queendom. But his legend lives on. Maybe he'll keep writing the books, he'll keep delivering the lectures. His cause has become even more stronger, and some of his books are brilliant, and we should read them. For example, start from The Midnight's Children. That is all for this session. Thank you so much. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you can get the notifications of these videos as and when we post them. Thank you so much, and take care.